What is going on, guys? Today I'm going to be ranking all 7 Predator films from the worst to the best. So Prey just released a few days ago, and leading up to it I went back and watched the ones that I haven't seen yet. I've reacted to 5 of these films all on my channel. That includes the first 2 Predator films, Alien vs. Predator, Predators, and Prey. All 5 of those, there's reactions to them on my channel. But when it comes to Alien vs. Predator, Requiem, and The Predator, there are not reactions to those on my channel. So if you want to see more in-depth thoughts and you want to see my reactions to the full entire movie, go check out those reviews on my channel. There should be a playlist titled like Alien and Predator franchise reactions or something on my channel. So definitely go check those out. We are going to be talking about all of them in this video, including the Alien vs. Predator crossover films, because they still count as Predator films in my opinion. Again, I'm a very new viewer of this franchise, therefore obviously I'm not going to have some like nostalgic feelings for certain films because I only watched all of these for the first time within the past 2 years. There's a lot of people who grew up with the older ones. There's a lot of people who were able to actually see them in the theaters when they released, but I am not one of those people. So maybe that makes my perspective more unique compared to other people. I don't know. But yeah, I'm just going to do this anyways because I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about all these films and give a ranking for them. Coming in last place is going to be Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, without a doubt. This is the sequel to Alien vs. Predator, and it's pretty bad. Like, this is by far the worst movie on this list for a number of reasons. I don't even really have any positives to go over for this film. Like, maybe you could say some of the Predator action is enjoyable, I guess. There's a couple sequences where it's like, okay, that was kind of cool. It's a really gory movie, and I do think the gore adds to it a little bit, but that's really the only positives I can say. In terms of the story, it's probably the most boring out of all of them. It doesn't really have any intrigue in it. There's not really a definitive story to it either. There's a bunch of different characters that are all within a bunch of different groups. They're kind of like all separate for the whole movie, and then certain stories like kind of connect later on in the movie. But there's so many stories, and especially in the first half of the film, they're building up all these different things, and you have no idea how they connect. And they never really get satisfying conclusions. They never really get satisfying connections within each other. It just, at the end of the day, felt like we had a bunch of random stories just for the sake of it. I didn't enjoy that. I thought that was really stupid. And, you know, maybe you could say, okay, the action's not, or the story's not good, so maybe the action can be enjoyable. Like I said, there's maybe a couple sequences that are enjoyable, but for the most part, the action's pretty terrible. It's poorly edited, and the lighting is god-awful. You cannot see what's happening in most of these scenes because it's so dark. Like, I don't know what they were doing with the lighting in this movie, but you could not see a lot of the action scenes. And like I said, it was cut in a way that just made it hard to tell what was going on. So it's definitely going to be the lowest rated of all the movies on this list. Number 6 is going to be The Predator from 2018. I was very excited to watch this because I feel like there's a lot of movies that came out within the past couple years that are part of like big franchises that a lot of people hate on, and I tend to actually personally like. I can name a bunch off the top of my head. I'm not going to do that, but I can definitely name a bunch because, I don't know, a lot of people have nostalgic connections for the older films in these franchises, so a lot of the times they will just hate on the newer ones because it's new and nobody likes the new stuff. They love the old stuff. A lot of people are like that, so I was kind of expecting to go into this film and be like, okay, that actually wasn't that bad. Like, I actually enjoyed that quite a bit, but no, everyone was right. This movie's not very good. I don't think it's god-awful, though, because at the very least it has some entertaining aspects to it. It's a Shane Black movie, so it has a lot of comedy to it, and Shane Black is known for having a lot of comedic moments in his films. I've only seen a couple of his movies, but this one felt like it didn't feel like Shane Black actually had much control over this movie, I think is really what a lot of people came down with after watching this movie. And I believe, I looked into it a little bit, I believe there was a lot of reshoots and studio meddling with this movie, so it wasn't like it was fully Shane Black's vision put to screen, which makes sense because he is a really good director, he is a really good writer. So you might be wondering, how could he possibly put this movie together? Like I said, I think it's because of all that. But even stuff that I think might have been in his control, like a lot of the dialogue, I just hated. Like, this dialogue was bad. Was it entertaining? Yeah, but in like a guilty pleasure sort of a way, where it's like, this is so terrible, but I'm kind of enjoying it because it's just so stupid. Like, a lot of the things these characters say, I really like the cast here. There's a lot of great actors, especially Thomas Jane. I really like Thomas Jane. He was really fun in this movie, but a lot of the stuff he says is just ridiculous, but it's a little entertaining, I guess, but that doesn't fit a Predator movie, though. That's the problem. If this was like a parody of Predator, some sort of a spoof movie, like those like scary movies that exist, or like Austin Powers or something that's supposed to be a parody, I would probably enjoy it more. But this is not a parody. This is supposed to be a continuation of the Predator franchise, and it does not do a good job with that at all. The CGI is pretty terrible. It came out 2018, and it feels like it was made for TV. It does not feel like it was made for a theatrical experience, so that's a problem. And even the comedy, like, a lot of it wasn't even that funny. Like, some of it was okay, a little bit funny, but it wasn't laugh out loud funny, which if you're gonna go so hard with the comedy, at least make it funny, and I just don't feel like it was that. The story, all over the place. I mean, there was so many weird cuts with the story, and like I said, I think it's because of studio meddling. I think they messed with a big chunk of this film and changed it around a lot, so it just turned out to be something that just did not work very well. But at the end of the day, it's at least higher than Alien vs. Predator Requiem, because at least some of the action is enjoyable, and I have a good time watching this movie, whereas Alien vs. Predator Requiem, there's nothing enjoyable about that movie at all. Coming at number 5 is going to be AVP, or known as Alien vs. Predator. They have like a weird title where it's like AVP and then the subtitles Alien vs. Predator. I don't know, it's a weird title, but I think this is enjoyable. It's a fine movie. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I think it's very much in the middle. It's very average. And a lot of that has to do with it is enjoyable watching the aliens go against the Predators. It's a fun crossover event that I think only really should have been one movie. Maybe they could have done more if they actually did it right, but of course the sequel did not do it right. But the action in this one is actually shot pretty well. The editing is pretty crisp. There's actually a lot of good scenes where you have a lot of good shots. Like, there's one shot in particular where like the Predator's like facing the alien straight on, and it's like a really cool shot. And there's a lot of scenes with our characters kind of going through this alien ship and discovering a lot of things, and I think it's a fun mystery. Of course, we know some of the things that are probably going to be going on in this movie. It's probably just going to be, you know, aliens and predators going at it. And at first, it's really not that. At first, it's are humans having an issue with the aliens and predators separately. But then when they kind of combine, then it's like, okay, now it's going to be a versus film between them. And like I said, it's a lot of fun. Is the story good? Not really, but that's why it's an average film to me, because the story is not enough. You have to have a good story if it's going to be elevated as a great film, right? But if it's just enjoyable because it's got fun action, I can't really call it a great film. I think it has to have good story as well, and I don't think this really has that. I think the snow setting was a nice change of pace for the Predator franchise. We're used to always having jungles. We had a city once, but this is the first time we got like a snow setting, and I thought it was really cool. And that's really all I have to say about this movie. I think the characters were quite forgettable, but at least they weren't annoying. You know, at least they weren't complete wastes of time like they were in the sequel to Alien vs. Predator. Now, the top 4 are all good movies, at least good. Some of the top ones are like great movies, but all of these I would recommend. I think they're all solid watches, and they are good additions to this franchise. So number 4 is going to be Predators from 2010. So just watched this for the first time on this channel just like a week or two ago, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. I didn't enjoy it, I think, as much as a lot of people do, though. I think a lot of people have this even higher on their lists. I had a few issues with it. I think my biggest issue was a lot of the exposition dumping, specifically with Adrian Brody's character. And I love this character. I thought he was a fun character, but he like somehow just knew like everything of what was going on with the Predator in such a weird way. Like, the littlest bit of information he would have, and he'd be like, oh, it must be because of this and that. And I'm like, how do you know these things? You know, like, we know them as the audience members. We know it because we've seen the prior film, so we know how the Predators work. We know what they do and why they do it. But he shouldn't be knowing all this so easily. And I know why they do that, because they don't want to waste the audience's time with the characters not knowing what's going on when the audience does, because that can get kind of exhausting after a while. But they didn't give him enough information to really be able to tell exactly what's happening in the situation, and it felt like he just knew exactly what was going on. And I think that was kind of, in one way, meant for the newer viewers, so they could just exposition dump the newer viewers who haven't seen other Predator films, because they kind of wanted this to be a movie where you could watch it without having seen any of the other Predator films. It was almost like a soft reboot in that way, I guess. And I guess that makes sense, but you have to do it in a more organic way than what they did it, and I don't think they did it in an organic way. And for the people who have seen the other movies, again, it just seems like out of place for this character to just know exactly what's going on, and I always thought that was kind of weird. I thought the CGI was a bit iffy for 2010 as well. I don't know what it is about Predator movies, but not a lot of them have had good CGI. I think this is probably one of the weakest franchises out there in terms of their CGI. Their practical effects are beyond incredible though, which is so weird. It's like their practical effects are some of the best I've seen in any franchise, but then their CGI is like some of the worst. It's so weird. Well, worse compared to like big franchises is what I mean. Obviously, if you compare every single movie out there, it's way better than most films, but for a pretty decently sized budget franchise, I think the CGI should be a little bit better, especially for a movie that came out in the 2010s. But there's a lot of good things about the movie as well, though. I love the cast. The cast is really solid. The characters are mostly, not all of them, but mostly they're given really good personalities, really unique and distinct personalities. The Predator action here is really well shot, really well done. There's a lot of good gore in this movie. They have this little Lawrence Fishburne side story that I don't really like too much, but it's not really like too long, so it's not that big of a deal. It's a pretty quick movie. It almost feels like a slasher film in some ways, which is great. Like, you have all these characters and they're kind of killed off one by one, and I enjoy it for that. I think Topher Grace's character was one of the funner parts of the movie until the very end, and they had that weird character change, which I thought was a decent twist, I guess, but I don't know. I like this character, though. He was enjoyable in the first big chunk of the movie. Now, my number 3 is going to be Predator 2 from 1990. So this one, I think, is the most underrated and underappreciated of all the Predator films, because I usually see this one being rated a little bit lower, and I don't honestly get it. I think this movie is really solid. It's a really solid sequel to the original. I think it does a lot of things great. One of the best things it does for me is that it feels very different than the first, and that's so important for sequels in my opinion. I hate when sequels come out and they just do what the first one did, but in a little bit of a different way, like maybe a tiny twist on it, but for the most part, it's like the same movie just repeated, rehashed. This does not do that at all. This is very different than the first one. You do not have the same setup. You do not have the same location at all. We go into Los Angeles, a damn city. So different than the first one, obviously, because the first one's in a jungle. Then we go to the city. Such a great change for Predator. And I think it's really cool because the city location works really well. And it's a cop story at the end of the day. Like, this is one of those, 90s cop movies, which there's a lot of them out there. It's like almost a cliche genre in and of itself, but it really works well as that because Danny Glover's character is so enjoyable. And I know a lot of people call him like he's basically ripped right out of Lethal Weapon. It's basically the same character, but I don't think that's a problem. I actually think he works really well as that cop character. And yeah, although we know how the Predators work, we don't know exactly how they work. When you really go back to it, the first one doesn't really go in depth with exactly how the Predator works. So there are still some things and some mysteries that we have about these creatures that we learn about in this movie. And it's not like we're relearning things that we've already known about the Predator like we do in Predators. We're not relearning anything. We're learning new things. We really do learn about like the whole trophy thing and how they just like to hunt for fun. It's not all about trying to kill. It's literally just want to have, it's a sport to them. And it's such an interesting thing, and especially towards the end of the movie where he actually gets to see the trophies himself in the spaceship. That was awesome. Really, really awesome. Gary Busey's character is fun here too. He's kind of like a villain, but like a villain in a way where you kind of understand where he's coming from and some of the things he's doing, but it's just really weird the way he's doing it. And he is mostly a villain for a lot of the film. But I really enjoy his character. I really enjoy his inclusion in this movie. Bill Paxton's here as well. He's really great. There's a lot of great kills in this movie as well. A lot of fantastic characters. Even what was his name? Ruben Blades' character. He was fantastic as well. Like, there's a lot of great characters in this movie that I really enjoy watching. And the only negative I can really say is maybe some of the CGI is outdated. But again, it came out in the 90s, so I mean, it's kind of expected to happen. But when you go to the practical effects on the Predator especially, it looks amazing, just as it did in the first one. So I think this is a really solid sequel. I don't really have many issues with it. So yeah. Number 2 is going to be the newest addition to the Predator franchise, and that is Prey, of course, from 2022. And I am very happy with this movie. I think it really was the best sequel, the best Predator movie since the original. And I wasn't expecting that, honestly. When I first saw the trailers, I was expecting it to be just a okay movie, maybe at best. I just don't know why I didn't expect much from it. But then when I watched it, I was like, yeah, okay, this is doing some good stuff. So The only negative I can say, and again, it's related to CGI. I can't believe that's one of the only like complaints I have with this franchise is related to some of its computer generated effects. Like, it's not even the practical stuff. The practical stuff all looks amazing, but I feel like they overuse CGI in this movie in places where I don't feel like they needed it. Like, for example, Predator in this movie is invisible for a lot of the movie, and the invisibility effects obviously have to be CGI, and I don't think it looks that great, so it kind of gets funky looking at this, you know, invisibility creature. I'd rather just see the creature design itself for as much of the movie as we can. I don't need to see the, you know, CGI stuff. I get why he would be doing it. It makes sense why he'd be using his invisibility, but I would prefer if he wasn't using it for more of the movie. Like, I feel like in the other movies he wasn't using it nearly as much as he was in this one. And that's really the only negative I can say. The CGI itself was actually pretty good though, like especially on the animals and stuff. Like, it looked really crisp. It's just some of the scenes it was like, okay, I would prefer if they went more in the practical direction. I really wanted to see the practical effects of this creature in action, but I don't think they used it as much as I was hoping. But holy shit, was the action amazing here though. I mean, the scenes where Predator is killing people, and there's a lot of it. This is probably the best in terms of like just letting the Predator go on a rampage. We don't really see that in the same way in the other films. In the other films, it's kind of like he kills people one by one. In this one, we get to see full-on scenes where he's taking on groups of people and just slicing them up, doing all sorts of things to them, and it is really awesome. Our main character, Naru, is really entertaining in this film. I think she's a great character. I like seeing her overcome this struggle she has throughout the film, where she feels like she's not being appreciated enough from her tribe because she's a woman, and therefore they all look at her as like, oh, she probably should stay back and do stuff back at the camp. She shouldn't be going out and hunting and stuff, but she tries to prove herself, and that's kind of the whole motivation in the movie. She wants to prove herself to her tribe, and so that's why she's trying so hard to do this. And also, she of course cares about them and doesn't want them to die from some creature out there, but that gets her involved in all this stuff, and it's really enjoyable seeing her overcome that struggle and actually be able to take on this Predator, and it works really well. The Predator design in this one is really cool. It's very different than the other ones because it's older. This takes place in the 1700s, so that's very different than the other films. So of course his gadgets are a bit different. They're not as futuristic. They're a little bit more ancient, I guess. I mean, they're not really that ancient, but they're more ancient compared to what we see in the other movies, and I think that's really well done. You get to see like his laser cannon, but we expect it to be a laser cannon, but it's not. It's actually just like these like little, like they were like mini spears or something that just came right out and like stabbed the dude in the face. Really amazing design though. I really like his new gadgets and the new stuff you get to use in this film. The setting is really great as well. I mean, it's another jungle setting, but it's a very different type of jungle, very mountainy, and again, because it's in the 1700s, it's very different than the ones we see in the other movies. There's no like guns and stuff being used except for like some old-timey guns that they use towards the end of the movie, but there's no like machine guns or anything like that. So I think it's very different, and I think that's the best thing this franchise could have done, is to do something very different instead of just trying to keep adding on to the prior movies. They kind of just reset everything by doing a prequel, in air quotes. It's not really a prequel, but it does take place before everything, so I guess you can consider it a prequel, but it doesn't connect to any other movies, and I think that's what works about it best, is that it doesn't connect. It's just its own thing with the Predator, and it's a really great movie. Number one is of course going to be the original from 1987. So I am never, I mean most of the time, not someone who's gonna say the original is the best in a franchise. If a franchise has like more than 4 movies, it's very rare I'll think the first one is the best. There's only a couple times I feel like where I'm always like, okay, yeah, the first one's the best in this franchise. A lot of the time I feel like I'm in the minority, where I'm like, okay, actually I prefer other ones. Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, a lot of people say the first one's the best, the original's the best. I think the second one's the best. There's a lot of other franchises that are like that for me. This one's not one of those franchises though. This is one of the ones where I do think the original is the best, and it's really going to be hard to beat. I don't think it's a masterpiece of a movie like a lot of people think, but I really love it. The only negative I can say is the same thing I said for Predator 2. This CGI is very outdated, and that's just, you know, of course going to happen with the movie in the 80s. Obviously, most movies in the 80s didn't use that much CGI. This one used a bit more because you kind of had to. I mean, when the Predator goes invisible, of course it's going to have to use some CGI effects there, and it does look outdated, but you get over it pretty quickly because who cares, right? We know when it was made. It doesn't matter if it's outdated. It's just the way it is. But I have to mention it at least. But when it comes to the practical effects, especially on the Predator design, of course, holy shit, it's incredible. That thing looks amazing. When you see its full face at the end of the movie, it is so cool. The cast here is awesome. A bunch of badass dudes. Mainly, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger is incredible as Dutch in this movie. And of course, you have Carl Weathers as well, who I think was really incredible in the 80s, of course, in the Rocky franchise as well. But here he is fantastic. They're all really just insanely badass, ripped dudes just kicking ass. And it's a lot of fun to watch. But they don't kick ass. That's the thing, though. You think they'd be kicking ass, but a lot of them get torn up. They get killed. They get demolished by this predator, which is what's so interesting about this movie. You expect this badass, buff group of dudes to have like no struggles out there. Like they take out other armies no problem in the beginning of the movie, but then when they get taking on this alien creature, they just get demolished. And it's almost like a slasher film in that way, where you get to see this group of characters taken out one by one, and every character has a good distinct personality that's interesting, just like the Predators movie. So I think that's really cool. The jungle setting here is great. The soundtrack is great. The soundtrack repeats itself a couple times, I think, in this franchise. They reuse a lot of the music, but this is the first time it was used, and it was just really good. It really fits the jungle aesthetic. The action's great here, and of course, I'm gonna say it again, Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dutch is fantastic. This is one of my favorite roles from him, of course. Not better than Terminator 2, of course, but this is definitely one of his best roles, and he feels like a really unique character. He doesn't feel like he feels like in a lot of his other movies where he just feels like Arnold Schwarzenegger. This one, he does feel like Dutch. You know, he does not feel like he's just playing the same character he always plays, which is weird because you think it would be, because it's another character who's really buff and you know, badass like he is in most of his movies, but he has a different feel to himself here that I think really works. And I really love how the end of the movie, kind of tying back the whole theme of this movie, he doesn't beat the Predator with his badass muscles and guns and stuff. Like, he doesn't use his power to defeat it. He uses his intelligence, which I think works perfectly with this franchise. I think it's one of the coolest things this first one did, and yeah, I don't think any of these other ones could possibly beat it. I hope there's a future one that does, but none of these ones beat it. It's hard to do, I guess. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How would you rate the Predator franchise? I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.